Hi, today we're going to be talking about recommendations, something that juniors in high school need to be paying attention to. Today I'm going to talk about what recommendations are, who uses them, why they use them, and how students can be more effective in getting a great recommendation for their college applications. So today we are going to first define what it is that a recommendation is. The quickest definition I know is that recommendations are forms completed by teachers and counselors to tell colleges about you. So sometimes students get confused about this because they think that they are letters of recommendation, because that's the terminology that a lot of counselors use. But they are really forms, and it's important that students know that, because the forms actually include a lot more than just a letter. Another word for recommendations are evaluations, and that's a good way of thinking about it. We're going to talk a lot about recommendations today. So let's talk about the different types of recommendations. So there are generally three types. The first is the counselor recommendation. That is the recommendation that is provided by a high school counselor, usually the person who is guiding the college list development and the application process for a student. So that might be your guidance counselor at your high school, or it might be the college counselor at your high school, depending on how your high school works. Almost all colleges, if they accept recommendations and use them as part of the process, are going to require a counselor recommendation. And it often is filed and sent off to the college without a student even knowing about it. So now you know, the college counselor recommendation is absolutely part of the application process. The second type is the teacher recommendation. So students get to choose what teachers complete recommendations for them for the college application process. Generally, colleges look to see teachers that are recommending who are recent teachers. So that generally means junior year, because once a student starts working on applications, it's senior year. And there's not enough time in senior year in the fall for a teacher to get to know a student to write a really good quality application recommendation. So generally recommend students choose a junior year teacher. They will have had a full year with that teacher. Also, you generally want to choose a teacher who teaches an academic subject. Math, English, social science, or a science, because those are the things that are important to colleges. They want to know how students do in an academic environment. And then the third kind of recommendation is what's called other. It's kind of a grab bag. It can be anything from a boss at a job to a pastor to a coach to a tutor. And those are sometimes allowed by some colleges, and other colleges don't even accept recommendations from other people. So who uses them and what role do they play in the college application process? So the first thing we're going to look at is, how do I find out if the college I'm applying to requires them? Well, the first thing you can do is look at their website, and hopefully it'll be clear there. But the other option is go to the application. So the Common App is what we've got on the screen, and it's a pretty good example of how you can go into the application, find a college, and see what their application requirements are. And you'll notice at the bottom of the screen under recommendation, it lists counselor recommendation is required. And for this particular school, which is Loyola Marymount in California, there is one teacher evaluation required and 0 required other evaluations. But notice for LMU that they do offer the chance to have 2 optional teacher evaluations and 3 optional other recommendations. So if a student has 3 teachers that they want to submit recommendations for LMU, they certainly can do that. 1 is going to be required, but 2 are optional. And the same is true for the other. If you have a pastor, boss, coach of some kind that writes a recommendation for you, you can file that for your application with LMU as one of the optional slots. Okay, so how do they use them in the decision-making process? Well, this is a snapshot, a screenshot from College Data, a great website with lots of good information. This is for Loyola Marymount again, and it is a rundown of a number of the criteria, the components, if you will, of the college application that colleges look at. And College Data is great because they have this wonderful set of columns where they'll tell you, well, which things are important to LMU and used in the decision-making process, and which things aren't considered. So you can look and see that for LMU, it's not considered an interview or the level of the applicant's interest. So it's nice to know those things are off the table, but LMU absolutely is going to focus on your experience in high school. Your academic GPA is probably the most important factor they consider. And then if you look in the middle of the screen, it says recommendations considered. So they are absolutely using recommendations as part of their decision-making process, although not as important as some of the other criteria. So what are colleges actually looking for when they read through a recommendation? The first thing that they're looking for is they're trying to figure out who you are as a student. They're going to be asking you to join their student population. They want to know, what are you like as a student? Will you succeed at our university? Will you fit in? What are you going to be like when you get here? What are you beyond your GPA and your extra activities? What do people say about you? What are kind of the qualitative characteristics of you? Because ultimately they want to make a decision about you, whether to admit you or not, because ultimately they want to admit students who are going to be successful at their university. So instead of telling you more about it from my perspective, I'm going to give you an opportunity to listen to admissions officers, who are the people that actually make these decisions at colleges.
So when we're reading a recommendation letter, what we're looking for is what kind of presence you are in a classroom. And that's very important to us because ultimately what a university is it's a lot of classrooms. It's a lot of people looking to discover new knowledge.
Teachers that can give anecdotes about a student in the classroom can be really helpful because we're trying to imagine this student in our classroom. And we're wondering if this is a student that always is speaking up and always raising their hand. You know, the student that the teacher would ask to watch the class if they had to leave the room for a minute, or if this is a student who's fairly quiet and only speaks once in a while, but when that student speaks, it kind of turns the conversation on its head.
What I recommend for students to do and for you to do in this process would be to sit down with that teacher and maybe even give them 4 or 5 bullet points of, you know, why you wanted them to write your letter of recommendation. So remind them what you did in their class, right? So love the group work. That was a real favorite of mine. I felt like that really gave me a chance to do some teaching in the class as well as learning. Or that paper that I wrote on Twain, James, and Howell, I felt was a good, you know, representation of my writing ability. Or, you know, I really felt like that group project that we had to do, you know, allowed me to both be a participant, but also a leader, you know, and really, again, remind them of what you did in the class so they can write a much more personalized letter. The last thing in the world you want to get is sort of a template sort of a letter where, you know, they're sort of plugging in things about good student, we, you know, always gets the work done, works hard.
The biggest thing we see with recommendation is what we call the template recommendation, which is basically a very kind of form recommendation. And all they need to do is kind of take out the names, the activities, you know, some of the personal attributes and replace them in order to describe one person, but also describing 20 people.
So to really help your teachers write a terrific letter of recommendation that doesn't look like a template, you really want to get specific with those examples. You know, really let them know who you are, remind them who you were in their classroom, because basically admissions officers, they like those anecdotes. They like the specificity. That's really going to help them, you know, understand you in the context of that classroom.
Another thing that I look for a lot in recommendations is something I call separating. So is your teacher saying, this is a top student in 10 years? Are they separating you from the group? Or are they saying, this is a good student? Both of those are fine, but you know, one does suggest that you are doing something extraordinary in the classroom that's making you stand out from the crowd.
All right, so how is it that colleges get this information? So we're going to look at the actual forms that the Common App sends to counselors and teachers to gather the information that they're going to base their decision on. So on the screen is the counselor form, and there's 2 parts to the counselor form. The first is an evaluation. How long have you known this student and in what context? And then the second is, what are the first words that come to your mind as you describe this student? So it's important to have a relationship with your counselor, because otherwise they're going to be sort of feeling in the dark about what the words are that they would use to describe you. So if you have a chance to go and meet with your counselor on a regular basis, I encourage you to do that, because again, they'll be writing information about you to support your college application. The second part of the counselor form is the comments area. And this really is that letter. It's an essay format that the counselors can write. It's very free form. It can be short, it can be long. It's answering the questions of how well do you know the student? What do you know about them? What do you think we should know as a college as we evaluate them for college application? All right, so that's the counselor form. Let's look at the teacher form now. So this one's going to be a little bit more in depth, and that makes sense because teachers are going to know you better. They spend more time with a student in a classroom than a student spends with the counselor. And so the information is a little bit more in depth and detailed. And it starts with this background information. The first is, how long have you known the student? What are the first words that come to mind when you think about this student? What grade levels did you teach this student in? And then what courses did you teach? And then we move to the second and third sections of the teacher form. And the second section is something called ratings. Now, this might surprise you, but these are the 15 characteristics that colleges look at when they are evaluating college applications. And they are asking teachers not how well do you exemplify these particular characteristics, but how do you compare to your peers? So it might be helpful to take a look at these and imagine what it is that your teacher might be thinking when he or she is trying to fill this out for you or on your behalf. So take a look at those qualities and kind of assess for yourself, where are you? And then the third part of the teacher form is the evaluation. And that again is very similar to the counselor form. It's where a teacher can freeform write the letter portion of this. And it will be a narrative. It will be what the teacher thinks colleges need to know about the student's performance inside the classroom with their peers against the academic standards, and then anything else that they choose to include that they think might be helpful for colleges to know. Okay, so the $1 million question is, what's a teacher or a counselor going to write in their form, their recommendation for you? So on the screen is an exercise I have my students go through, which is a self-assessment for the recommendations piece. And it's one way of saying to yourself, okay, where do I fit? What would my teacher say about me? Would she or he say I'm the best student that they've ever taught? Or am I one of the best students in the class? And be honest about where you are currently, just to get a sense of, okay, how strong is this component going to be in my recommendations? The other issue is, or the other way to approach this is to do a little bit of homework. And I have my students take these 3 steps. The first of which is, right, what 3 words do you think your teachers would use to describe you today if they were being asked, if they were filling out these forms? And then, okay, think about, given that you know what those are, what are 3 words you would like your teachers to use about you? Maybe those first three words are not very good, and you have a goal in mind. Well, what doesn't get said out loud is not going to be a goal that you can reach. So let's make sure now that you commit to what is it that you'd like to have teachers say about you. And then the third part is, how do you get there? What is it that you could do right now? One thing the next time you're in that teacher's classroom to improve your relationship with that teacher and to let them know that you need their help and help them get to know you a little bit better, because maybe you didn't realize how important this was before. The idea isn't to change who you are, but to let the teachers in to know who you are so that they can support you on your college journey. And then the last piece of this is there's a couple of really good questions to ask if you aren't sure kind of where you are. Do a little bit of self-discovery. What are your strengths as a student, as part of the student body at your school? What are you good at? And then what are you most proud of? These are reflection questions that you'll need to cover to write your essays for college anyway. So it's a good thing to start thinking about it, because then you can share this information with your counselors and your teachers and help them know who you want to present to colleges as part of your application. So let's summarize this. What are the key points that you need to know about recommendations? So recommendations aren't just letters, they are forms that the teachers and the counselors complete as part of the regular college application process. Most colleges ask for recommendations. A big exception where I am in California is that the University of California system and the Cal State system do not currently require recommendations as part of the application process, but most colleges use them. Another important point is you get to choose which teachers complete the forms for you. And that's important. You want to choose teachers who are going to be positive about you, have good things to say about you, and with whom you have a good relationship. You're also going to want to choose teachers from junior year in an academic subject, usually. Because you want teachers who've taught you recently so that you're fresh in their mind, and you want teachers who've taught you a course that's probably going to be at least similar to what you're planning to major in. So you have an opportunity to use the next few months to change or improve the impression that a teacher has of you at this point. And it's really important to share your college plans with your teacher and your counselor so that they can support you and make sure that your college journey and college application process is as effective as possible. I hope you found this helpful. If you have more information or you need more information about recommendations, feel free to reach out to me at collegemadeclear@gmail.com. Thank you.